Do you have an all-star HR team? You may feel your team is already performing at a high level, but let's take a closer look. Would your company's top leaders and employees agree that your HR team are operating at a high level? Are team members able to influence top executives on difficult topics? Are team members' business and strategy focused on the challenges the organization is facing? Does the executive team trust your direct reports as advisors on human capital issues? If you can answer yes to these questions, you have built an outstanding team. If you feel there is room for improvement, Strategy Focused Group can create a custom development program to elevate the quality of your HR team. We use HCI certification programs as well as non-certified HRBP MBA Masterclass to give your team a laser focus on the business and strategy. Please email us at info@strategyfocusedgroup.com.
Identify and book the world's best speakers for your next event. MENA Speakers is the leading speakers and MC bureau in the Middle East. We bring global talent to the region and have established the region as a key global hub for speakers. Inspire and motivate your audience. Find exactly what you are looking for by working closely with us to assist you in understanding the cost-benefit analysis tied to selecting a speaker for any event. Ensure that your audience is educated, engaged, and empowered. Connect with us for a quick response and tailored advice. Book your speakers now.
Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it's the CEO series, where we bring together global leaders, innovators, disruptors, and entrepreneurs. Our guest today is Soumya Bhattacharya, who's an author, journalist, literary critic. He's the author of 6 critically acclaimed books on fiction, narrative, nonfiction, and memoir. His most recent book is the novel 13 Kinds of Love, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. His work has been published in the New York Times, the London Library Magazine, and the Sydney Morning Herald in Australia, as well as Sports Illustrated in South Africa. Welcome, Soumya. How are you, my man?
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me. It's lovely to be here. Pleasure.
I'm so glad to have you here. I'm going to tell you the reason I reached out to you. You wrote an article, and the name of the article was, "If being seen working is more important than actual working, this isn't for you." That was a great article. That was a great article.
Thank you.
And I tweeted that out because it kind of talked about this new so-called world of work. What inspired you to write that?
You see, I write a column for one of India's best-known newspapers, among many other things that I do. And by the time the deadline for the column was coming up, this whole thing about the workforce being summoned back to offices was going on.
Yeah.
So there was Apple, which I talked about in the column. And they said that it would be a day a week, then 2 days a week, then 3 days a week, and so on and so forth. And there was a great deal of backlash from a certain section of the employees who said that they'd rather quit than go back to work.
Uh-huh.
And you know what writing a column is all about. So it has to be about the timing, and the timing has to be just right.
Yeah.
So it can't be that its moment has passed. It can't be a moment too soon.
Mm-hmm.
And the timing for it was just right to write about some of the things I felt about working from home and working from anywhere.
Mm. So many companies are struggling with this. You know, some are saying putting in hard days for you to come in. Some are offering more flexibility. I'd say in the UK now, they're doing a test now for a 4-day work week.
That's right.
So what do you think about all this transformation from work? I mean, I think one of the things COVID has shown us that we can still do work from anywhere. We don't have to be in a physical location.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm all on board with that. I mean, this is one of the big big socio-cultural shifts engendered by the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, we couldn't have been doing this 2 years ago. So this whole idea of exchanges mediated through a screen,
Mm-hmm.
and that being pretty much as good as anything else,
Yes.
is, I think, one of the biggest socio-cultural shifts of our times.
Yeah.
I mean, for more than a quarter of a century, I've had to go into an office and spend 10, 12, 14 hours a day there. I've had to do trips from Delhi to Bombay and Bombay back to Delhi same day. So you
Mm-hmm.
get up, red eye flight, turn up there, 2 hour meeting, come back, it's past midnight.
Yeah.
And think of the carbon footprint,
Yeah.
think of emissions, think of the damage to the climate.
Mm-hmm.
Then suddenly, with COVID, we realized we didn't need any of that.
That's
And
right.
all that we were doing was actually rubbish because we couldn't find any other way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now that there is a way, I think we should embrace it and we should use it the best that we can for all our purposes. I mean, the
Mm.
other day I gave a lecture at a private university in India, one of India's biggest, and it was just like this, mediated through a screen. And
Yeah.
it was brilliant. I
Mm.
didn't have to travel. I mean, traveling would have taken a day out of my life, and I
Exactly.
didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
So I think cutting out the commute, cutting out all the crap that goes with going into a physical workplace
Yeah.
is a brilliant thing, at
Yeah.
least for certain people. It may not work for everyone,
Yeah.
which is why the headline of the column, but it does work for certain people, just
Yeah.
as it doesn't for certain others.
Mm. Yeah, because depending upon the job that you're working on, and I think the COVID experience, I love. So I know there was a lot of disruptions and there was a lot of loss that people went through, but I think that COVID brought us into the world of work 4.0, of whatever point that you want to think about, because industrial revolution was kind of the first, and then the computers came in, and now this is totally different. And this is what, do you think that a lot of the leaders, like you talk about Apple, Tim Cook said that we want you back 2 days a week. Then Elon Musk comes out and say either you're going to work here or you're going to go someplace else. Mindset, is that an old mindset they're still clinging on to still want to do that in a past?
I don't know. I mean, in terms of Elon Musk, I mean, who can disagree with the richest man in the world and get away with it?
Yeah, I will.
So, so it's that. And he will have his way. I mean, money doesn't just talk, it screams.
Yeah.
So he will have his way. But I think it's a highly, highly unempathetic way to go about things.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't any longer ignore how the cultural dynamics of the world and the workplace
Mm.
has shifted.
Mhm.
And with the dynamics having shifted, without empathy, it's going to be very, very difficult to rally a workforce behind you, even if you're the richest man in the world.
Yeah. Richest man in the world. You mentioned empathy, a new mindset. But I think sometimes, and this is just my views on it, I think sometimes leaders that are hard nosed and trying to do one thing, they they may find it hard to let go of what they grew up in. They worked the ladder and they rose to the top, and they're still. You think it's because they're still trying to cling onto that because that was what propelled them to success?
Yeah, I think you may well be onto something there, but it depends, I believe, on the kind of leader you are. I mean, I've led newsrooms for a quarter of a century. I've managed more than 700, 800 staff.
Ooh.
And I had to do it in exactly the way that you said, in the non-virtual era, when you actually had to go in and then you climb the ladder. But I found it very easy to let go. So I think it has more to do
Okay.
with flexibility and mindset than to do with, okay, this is how I did it, therefore this is how it has to
Okay.
be.
So that mindset is kind of hardened in another era, and now we're moving to something that's totally different, and there's a struggle. going back, because when you follow the business news, you see this one says 4 days. This one says Airbnb. Did you see the announcement for Airbnb?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I mean, again, if I were to be a CEO, and I've never wanted to be one, and I wasn't one, I was an editor. I am
Yeah.
an editor. Um, it's very hard to balance what is best for the company, what you think is best for the company, and what you believe is best for the people. But I think the main thing should be, especially now in this new environment, which is completely unprecedented. And
Yes.
from 2 years ago and now, I mean, you just can't imagine this is how things would have been 2 years ago. It is extremely important to look at what staff needs, what people need.
Mm.
Because in the end, however much jargon you may spout about company and values and all the rest, it is people that are the company.
So in my business, you call that's the audience analysis. And audience analysis says who's it going to impact, audience, and I get input from them. So in thinking in terms of a CEO or senior leadership team, we go into the big conference room and we hash this out, and then we announce it, and the employee said, nope, we're not going to do that. So my thought has always been, did you ask them? Did you poll your people? Are you listening to what they're saying? Because I think when you see these misfires, it's because they didn't listen to anybody. Maybe they're only listening to the people who were C-suite people or the minus ones inside of the workforce.
Yeah.
So how do we bring in, if a company is struggling now to try and figure out which way we're going to go, what advice would you give to the so-called big room, the C-suite people? They saw your article and they said, so Mike, can you give us some inspiration on how we should approach this? What would you tell them?
No, I think the main thing, as I was saying, is it is about people, and it is about being different things to different people.
Mm-hmm.
The old way of calcified views, I think, is now over. So you need to adapt, and you
Yeah.
need to understand who wants what,
Yeah.
and it needs to be more of an empathy driven,
Yeah.
person driven, people driven approach. I mean, there may be someone who, and there are, I know lots of people who love going into the office.
Yeah.
So good. I mean, they should spend 5 days in the office, however many hours they want. At the same time, there will be people who don't.
Yes.
But if you force them, it's a case of what happened when Apple did, and people will look for something else. So you lose them. And in the process, maybe you lose people who are very valuable in many other ways, just not valuable in terms of turning up and spending those 8, 10, 12 hours every day.
Mm.
Maybe it's to do with the commute. Maybe they have cut out the commute and gone and relocated in a town or city where it's much less expensive to live.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that we've never really talked about in the pre-COVID days is that no company actually reimburses you for the commute, for the hours that you spend, not just the gas, not just the car, the
Yes.
hours that you
Yeah.
spend, which is often dead time.
Yes.
However many emails you might be answering in that hour, hour and a half up and down, which is often 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours for people,
Yes.
it is actually dead time, especially in places where the public transport system is not particularly evolved, and you have to rely on your own transport.
Yes.
No one ever has reimbursed an employee for that.
Mm.
And then suddenly in these past 2 years, people have realized that, whoops, I mean, this is lovely time. And why on earth would I want to go back and do that?
Yeah. So I read an article the other day about the airline industry. So the airline staff, their time clock doesn't start until that plane takes off. So they're there probably an hour before the flight, getting set up, all of these kinds of things going through hour and a half, whatever time that is. There's no pay for that. Pay doesn't start clicking on until that plane takes off. And so we can
Yeah.
just,
So if you add the commute to that,
yeah,
that's a very, very long time.
yes. But again, a rigid mindset from another era that may not want to be, discussed. Because a friend of mine sent me an article. I sent him an article on the must saying that you got to come back or otherwise you're going to lose your job. He said, I've already told all of my recruiters, see who we need that's working there, and we go after them. And we'll tell them, we offer you flexibility. So I say that to say, that's a strategic advantage for your competitors. When you make an announcement like that and say, hard nose, it's going to be here, no questions asked, you're either going to work 40 hours inside or you can quit. Everybody zoomed in on that. Every other car company that's making EVs are gonna connect to that. So it's a business case. Could we look at that as a business case that we have to offer flexibility as opposed to the hard-nosed, rigid approach?
I would certainly think so. Yeah, I'd certainly think so.
Mm-hmm.
That flexibility is the name of the game, and it could be flexibility not just in terms of going in and work hours for one particular person. It could be flexibility within the matrix of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So some people want to come in and they enjoy coming in for all sorts of reasons. Let them come in. Those that don't or want to come in only twice a week and do a kind of hybrid model, allow them to do that and evolve a kind of structure and a way of working which accommodates both.
Okay. So from an editorial perspective, you said you manage large teams inside of a newsroom. A newsroom in creating articles, you don't really need to be inside of that office to do that. That can be done from any place, correct? I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
That's right.
So it's not the kind of job that you really need people to be there to do that.
No, I think it depends on what kind of job it is. Because, as you said, if it's an airline pilot or cabin crew or flight attendants, I mean, you have to be there. You can't do that remotely.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's driving a truck, you have to be there.
Yeah.
So it depends on what kind of job it is.
Yeah.
In certain kinds of jobs, such as mine, I mean, you really don't need to turn up.
Yeah. But the model was before COVID, you did go in and you were there for
Yeah, absolutely.
8, 9, 10
Absolutely.
hours, and the entire room was full of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is what I said. I mean, I would do Delhi, Bombay, Bombay, Delhi trips, which I now realize was all for nothing.
Yeah.
So, because there was no other way. There was no other way that anyone could see of doing all the stuff that we did without being there in person.
Mm-hmm.
And being there in person, as in equating being there with being of value to the company, has always been hugely overrated.
Yeah.
I think the pandemic.
Hold it for a second. Give me a little more of that. You said that's way overrated. Give me a little more to that.
No, I mean, in the fact that a lot of people tended to believe, and those very people still believe, I think, that if you're around there physically, you're actually contributing more as
Yeah.
opposed to putting your head down, doing your stuff, and get the fuck out as soon as you're done.
Yeah.
So, I think that the pandemic has shown us that how overrated it was, and
Mhm.
it's actually one of the big lies of the corporate culture myth, and it has shown that up.
I love the way that you kind of lay it out. One of the biggest lies in doing. So that came. You mentioned in that article. You said petty politics, the gossip mongering, and all of these things that goes on inside of the function when we've got all these people inside of the room. Introvert, extrovert. If I'm an extrovert, introvert is kind of singular. We kind of like we don't do well out in a group. So do you think those people really enjoy this because now I don't have to deal with all the so-called BS that we're talking about? And this is what you mentioned in that article where you talked about the petty politics, the gossiping, and all these kinds of things that goes on.
Yeah, I mean, a a lot of people never enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It could be to do with the whole introvert extrovert binary that you've mentioned. A lot of people never enjoyed it, but those very people never had a choice. I
Yeah.
mean, you were there.
Yeah.
And then if you weren't sort of part of it in some way or the other, even tangentially, even obliquely, even remotely, though remotely now means something else altogether, but
Yeah.
I mean remotely in the old sense.
Yeah.
So even obliquely, tangentially, I mean, you were seen to be a kind of double introvert. So
Yeah.
it was introverted whole squared,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
But now, with that taken out of the equation, the so called introverts can do their stuff
Mm.
and be done with it. And all this, again, water cooler conversations are overrated, because what you're doing around water coolers is actually bitching about the people in the next cubicle. So, a lot of people enjoy that, and I can see that, and I've seen it over
Yeah.
so many years. So it's to do with nudge nudge, wink wink, bitch about X, bitch about Y. And well, it works for a lot of people, which is why
Yeah.
they love water cooler conversations,
Yeah.
which is probably why there are water coolers in an office.
I see why you're a good editor. I see why you're a good editor and writer, because you kind of break it down so that everyone can understand exactly what you're talking about. So with this, because that's a. I saw one CEO says, when we're not in the office, we don't have the creativity. We don't have the running into someone at the water. They mentioned the water cooler, and we can sit around and talk about ideas and exchange ideas and all these kind of things. But what you're saying is the reality of that. It's all BS. It never really worked anywhere.
What are we doing here now? We're exchanging ideas.
Exchanging ideas. Yes.
So, I mean, I don't see why you need to sit around a table with cookies and really bad coffee in front of you to exchange ideas. I mean, you could, if you actually put your mind to it, you could do it any way you want to. You
Mm.
don't need to be there and show that you're exchanging ideas. I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that you need to show that you're working, and an insecurity that if
Yeah.
I do not show that I'm working,
Yeah.
what will people think? I
Yeah.
think the ones who don't have that are the genuinely self-confident ones, are the ones who believe in themselves and know what they're up to, and they
Mm.
don't really care about having to put on a show about what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Putting on the front, I'm here, I'm doing all these kinds of things. So you mentioned, in the editorial space, managing a team of maybe 600 people or whatever that equation would be. Do you think a leader needs to be more expansive in their thought process? More, you mentioned empathy as a new type leadership competency versus hard nose. I need it here. I need it here. Does a leader in this new environment, does that change as to what we need for that new leader that's able to operate in this environment?
Um, as a leader, as a thought leader and a leader, I've always been very collaborative in my approach.
Okay.
And I think that collaborative approach, more of that is called for in the new
Yeah.
dispensation, the new era. I mean, unless you have people behind you, and that happens partly by being receptive to their ideas, by seeking out their ideas, by often taking their ideas as opposed to your own,
Mm.
that builds confidence down the line, that actually makes them want to be a part of whatever enterprise it is. At the same time, at some point in certain situations, and I've faced them many, many times, democracy ceases to exist.
Yeah.
So it has to be, I want this, I want that, I want the other, and I want it now. But if it's built on a bedrock of that kind of collaboration, I think people also understand, colleagues understand why you're saying, why you're being hard nosed at a certain particular point of time about a particular issue.
Mm. So maybe if I take what you're saying is that maybe we need to be a little more careful in this environment in putting someone in a leadership position. Because if my leadership style was baked in another era, and now I'm in a new virtual kind of environment, that's probably new skills, and maybe not so much on the technical side, but technical side versus soft skills on top of that to build a better leader.
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. I think soft skills, I think collaboration, empathy, adapting to the times, and being aware of how things have changed, of trying to let go of certain calcified ways of the old time is really really necessary now.
Yeah, I like your word choice, calcified. So that's a long, long, long time ago. In doing that, because I do a lot of work in leadership development, and I say leader post COVID is different than pre COVID, and you have to recognize that. And maybe as we begin the process of choosing new leaders, one of the stronger filters to that would be that soft side and making sure we can combine those two, because we still need the technical. I still would need to be an editor and understand all that editorial kind of process, but I need to have that extra baked in kind of soft skills, collaboration and teamwork and all of these kinds of things. Any
Yeah,
thought?
I mean, it's that's been true forever and forever. I mean, being an editor, for instance, was never only about being an editor. It had a lot to do with soft skills, teamwork, collaboration, empathy, building a team, encouraging new leaders, building a line of succession. It has always had to do a lot with that. It had to do a lot with inspiring trust. It had
Mm,
to do a lot with inspiring confidence. It had a lot to do with taking people along with you. I think what has changed now is some a lot of this earlier used to be implicit. I think what has changed now is a lot of this now has to be spelt out. A lot
oh,
of this has to be made explicit so that people know. And that's perhaps the difference between doing an exchange mediated by the screen and sitting face to face.
mhm.
So, because the screen does come in the way of certain things, these things need now to be made very, very clear
Yeah,
for any leader
yeah.
so that
I was.
everyone knows that this is who I am and this is what I'm about.
Mhm.
And so while I may demand X, Y, or Z from you on a certain occasion, this is why I am demanding this of you now in this particular instance.
Okay. The, I have a client. I had a client in the APAC region, and it was selling insurance. So when this virtual piece came into during lockdown, the salespeople who did a great job, whose sales just took off, were the younger people who understood the technology to do all we do. Whereas the older salespeople who were the top producers, their sales numbers dropped. So, what role does technology play in all of this? Because all of a sudden now, as you said, now you don't need to go to Bombay because you can do this, and you do this for a half hour, and you're done, and you're not sitting in an airport waiting for the next flight. But that's understanding the technological side of the new world of work. Your thoughts on technology and the role it's going to play going forward?
It's huge, isn't it? It's immense, absolutely.
Yes.
And I think it's also very important, therefore, to have a sort of very competent backup cast of IT guys, technology people,
Yeah.
because you may not be able to do everything yourself. Younger people are, certain others aren't. But then in that sort of an environment, if you have help at hand, competent help at hand, as we found out when we were backstage before we started, it makes a big, big difference. And I
Yes.
think that is becoming more and more critical as we go down the road further. And
Mm.
IT technology as a philosophy, technology as a kind of way of life,
Yeah.
while that is important, it's very important to have an accomplished set of people working backroom who know how to fix things when they go wrong,
Yeah.
who know how to set things up if you can't set them up. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, in the anecdote that you referred to, the sales guys, the older sales guys, they can do the sales pitch. They can probably do it mediated through a screen.
Yes.
But what happens if there's a lag of 7 seconds?
Yeah.
It becomes very annoying.
Uh,
So
yeah.
there, it is imperative to have a set of IT guys back room who can fix this, really good people, and
Mm-hmm.
who can make this transition seamless.
Mm. So there's a challenge in New York. Sixth Avenue in New York was office row, headquarters row. You go through there now, and it's still not back to where it used to be. Maybe 20% occupancy on any given day. Whereas at one time, you would have to literally almost walk in the street because there's so many people walking back and forth. So one of the offshoots of this new work from home, work from anywhere is those office buildings, the headquarter concept of everyone going in and filling a building up and leaving at a certain time. That's no longer there. And you
No.
go there, and it's like a ghost town.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely the upside of it is flexi time.
Yeah.
So you needn't go in at a certain time, clock in, and then clock out at a certain time. You can do 3 hours before you actually were supposed to have gone in. You
Mm-hmm.
can knock off when you want to, as long as the stuff gets done. Of
Yeah.
course, I mean, part of the deal is assuming that employees will be honest, that they're not watching
Yeah.
Succession while pretending to work. So there's that, of course. And I can see that's the kind of nanny state kicking in, and
Yeah.
senior managers worrying if someone's actually watching the French Open final instead of doing the sales pitch that he's supposed to be doing.
But wouldn't that come out in the wash when you're looking at your sales numbers at the end of the month?
Yes, of course it will. Of
Yeah.
course it will.
So, because the reason I mentioned that, because I had a CEO out of Saudi Arabia that told me during COVID, as soon as the regulations are lifted, I want everybody back into the office. He said, because I'm not going to pay you to sit home and watch Netflix. So my first thought was, where did you get that from? Why do you think someone would be sitting at home? Are you watching Netflix when you're home? Because I didn't understand the connection to that. So what you're saying is that if I can't see you out there sitting at a desk, you're not working. But it's going back to what you're saying, the water cooler. Think of how many people that work inside of an organization and they do literally nothing. They just come around, stand around. They know the game to play, and it's the same thing. But the assumption is if I'm working from home, I'm not really working. Well, that's going to come out in the wash, which are deliverables, KPIs, and all those kinds of things.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, that's what I was saying in the column as well, that if you have to, for a lot of people, you have to be seen to be working
Yeah.
to believe that you're actually
Yeah.
accomplishing anything at all.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for middle managers and senior managers who want to see all these characters out there in front of their eyes
Yeah.
to believe that they're actually doing anything.
Yeah.
In a way, it's a very juvenile kind of mindset and behavior and approach.
Yeah.
I mean, it's genuinely juvenile.
Yeah.
But again, that's been set in stone for so many years. I don't think 2 years is going to change that so abruptly, so swiftly, and so overwhelmingly.
But it's already out of the bag. There's no way you're going to ever put it back. So eventually, you're going to look 5 to 10 years from now, and there's going to be so many different work styles that this won't even be a conversation. And I think one of the reasons it's such a conversation today is because we're just kind of, COVID was lifted, and we're just kind of going back, and we're trying to figure it out. Don't be hard-nosed. Just try and figure it out and give people opportunities to do that. Because when I read the letter from Airbnb, and he says, I don't care where you work, as long as the work gets done. Now, I said, that's a pretty cool mindset. So
Mm.
if you need to if you need it for wellness, if you need to take an hour to watch something, I don't care. I need to report by tomorrow afternoon. Can you get it to me by 3, 4 o'clock? Fine.
Absolutely. And I think we're just scratching the surface
Exactly.
just yet.
Yeah.
And this is only the beginning. And 5 years, and there's no way the genie is going to go back into the lamp. The
It's
genie
not
is
going.
out. And it's just going to evolve more and more and more.
Yeah.
So, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line, we don't really know where we
Yeah.
will be.
Yeah.
And we're just scratching the surface. We're trying to figure out because it's really early days just yet.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of the things that needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
And it's one of the approaches and mindsets that really need to change.
Yeah.
If we don't, I mean, then everyone's going to be in trouble.
Yeah, everyone's going to be in trouble, and not only that, but if I'm hard nosed and it's a CEO, I want everybody back in the office. You're going to lose a large percentage of your staff. A lot of
Yeah.
the key strategic roles, you're going to lose those people. So you're going to have to. I think it's going to force that hard nosed individual to, once they start losing those key people, it's going to cause them to grudgingly come along and maybe make some changes and a little more flexibility in order to get it back on track.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because for every Tesla, for every Apple, there will be one Airbnb.
That's right. Yeah.
And if that keeps happening, the ones who are not flexible
Yeah.
will have to lose their inflexibility.
And they will look around and all of their key people, the resignations are coming up, and how are we going to proceed forward? The other thing I've noticed, and I watch these things every day.
No, I think sorry. I think what it will become 10 years from now. It's a shot in the dark, of course, but more than survival of the fittest, the Darwinian thing, it'll be probably survival of the most flexible.
Okay. Oh, I like that. Survival of the most flexible. Okay. That's a great tagline. Let's take a break, commercial break, and we'll come right back. And so I wanted to ask you talk to you a little bit about your book. And so let's take a break now, and we'll come right back.
See you on the other side.
Let's help you elevate your team. Email us at info@strategyfocusedgroup.com.
So let's talk about 13 kinds of love. I love that.
The title, yeah.
The title, yeah. So why? Where did you come up with that idea? And so it evolves around an apartment building in Mumbai, right? Correct? Of families living there. So give us kind of a high level view of what the book is about.
It talks about various families who live in that same really posh apartment building in Bombay, in one of Bombay's really upscale suburbs called Bandra.
Okay.
And you may know about it since you visit Bombay.
I know, man.
And
That's I stay in that
and
area
how
when I go there.
okay. At the Taj Land's End, I presume.
Yes, it is.
Okay. one of my regular haunts when I used to live in Bombay.
Oh, it is.
And
Okay.
it talks about how their lives crisscross and connect, and friendships born out of that, rivalries born out of that, how
Mm,
each life develops within that same apartment building, and
mm.
without it having one single protagonist or hero or heroine.
Yeah.
It has all these various characters
Yes.
who progress and live and love and lose and love again.
Mm. Any connection to a work environment from that book? Because when I was reading the kind of synopsis of it, interacting, we go to a building. There's 600 or 700 people there, and we try and connect with this one or that one, and kind of the same. Isn't that the same kind of interaction that we would have inside of a workplace? Was there any connection to that as you were writing that?
No, people there do different kinds of jobs. I mean, there are businessmen, there are salespeople, there are advertising guys, there's an author, there's a professor, there's a retired president of a company, but there's no link with work from home. So work is a part of it. And
Okay.
workplaces, I mean, there's a chauffeur. So workplaces is a part of it. But it has nothing to do with work from home because it was published just before the pandemic broke.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
I wrote it in
Yeah.
the years before that, when WFA or WFH in our lexicon didn't even exist.
Okay. So in writing a book, how did you come up with the premise of inside of the 13 kinds of love? How did you arrive at that? Or say, you know what, I want to chronicle and do a kind of a story on an apartment building. I'm always amazed by the creative process. In other words, how do you start that? How do you say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. This is going to be my next project. Where'd that come from?
This particular one, I'll tell you what happened was I used to live in a similar apartment building in Bandra in Bombay when I lived there for 12 years. And I'd stand out on my balcony and I'd see across the road
Yeah.
similar buildings. And I'd see in the evenings or late at night, just before going to bed, having a cigarette out on the balcony. Um, I'd see all these lights on in the apartments in the building opposite.
Yeah.
And I'd imagine how fascinating it would be to tell a story about the families in whose apartments
Oh,
those lights were on,
wow.
and how different they would be, although they'd be united only by the fact that they lived in that same building. How those lives would be so different from each other. And I'd stand there and watch often late at night, lights going off. So someone's gone to sleep. Sometimes you can hear the thud of a ball being kicked around.
Mm,
Sometimes there'd be a musical instrument playing. And I'd wonder what it would be like to give life to those lives on the
wow.
written page.
Wow. So did you interview people inside of the building, or you just kind of did
No,
it?
no, 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 no,
So
no,
it was
not
kind of
at all.
fictional?
Entirely, yeah.
Okay. I'm always amazed by creative people. I worked in the creative industry at one time, and I would see people, they would be looking at something and staring at it and trying to twist it around. I worked for Martha Stewart in New York for like 9 years. I was the vice president of human resources. And the thing that I saw one day is I went into a conference room and they were looking at pine cones. And they were trying to figure out which pine cones they were going to use to decorate a tree. And I'm kind of a business mindset, and I'm thinking 10 people, hourly rate, choose a pine cone because this is a lot of money. This is chalking up on this kind of thing. And I asked the head of the department, and I said, why couldn't you just, all the pine cones look alike? She said, they don't look alike. She said, when you do this, there's certain things you look for, and all of this. And I'm thinking, maybe I came from IBM to come there. So I'm coming like, whoa, hard nose. And then it's all of this creative stuff. But then when I saw the final product, when they shot the photo of the tree, every pine cone was perfect. But I was unable to connect that creative side. that you can think beyond just what you see, because a so-called business person, you're looking at things you got here, the numbers, what is this?
There
Amazing.
you go.
Yeah, amazing. So how's the book going? What does the sales look like? Because I'm going to purchase that book.
It's done well. It's been very well received.
Okay, is it on audible.com or it's only in hardback?
No, it's not available as an audiobook. It's available as a digital book, of course.
Digital book. Okay, so
as an ebook.
Okay, as an ebook. Okay, cool. So what's next for you? What are you working on now? You still managing a large team and getting out the let's talk.
No, I'm working independently. So I'm doing a column, I'm doing a spot of teaching, I host a books podcast, and there's a lot of writing that I do.
So disruption, the newspaper industry has been severely disrupted. Advertising has kind of gone away, which was the sustainability of that. What do you foresee the newspaper industry? Such a huge transformation that it's going through now.
Well, it's been happening for years and years, hasn't it? I mean, it's been happening for 10, 15, 18 years. And I think everyone's trying to figure out how to deal with it, and no one has.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the New York Times, I mean, they keep talking about how their digital subscription is going up, and up, and how more and more people are subscribing for the digital edition. But if you look at what you pay for the digital edition, it's nothing compared to what you'd pay for a print edition. Usually whenever these figures are released, they're released in terms of percentages. So it will be a 397% growth in digital revenue. But you look at the base, which is so small, it doesn't really matter. So I don't think anyone's been able to figure that out yet. But what is true is that at some point, nearly every media organization, especially legacy ones, will have to move for a pay-per-view model. I mean, it may not work initially, but other than that, this whole business of giving stuff away for free will have to stop.
Yeah.
And what will happen is the mindset of people will have to change. That I'm buying air tickets online. I'm not hoping that it will be free. I'm booking a hotel or a restaurant online. I'm not expecting it to be free. Then why should I expect content to be free? So that, I think there has to be at some point a confluence between this change of mindset and legacy media organizations being confident enough to charge for every bit of stuff they put out.
Yeah. I heard the other day that People magazine was in discussions of closing down. Now, People magazine, I think it was a weekly, but People magazine is looking to possibly close it up. Martha Stewart Living, Our Weddings edition was this thick, and it's no longer published. The magazine stopped publishing two months ago because it's all digital now. But the challenge from the business side, you talked about the business side, is that an ad page for one slot in that magazine could have been 200,000 easily. And if I go online and do that same ad, it's a fraction of what it would be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then if you sort of move from being a brick and mortar operation to moving entirely online, what you do is you cut costs massively. So you don't have to deal with distribution, with printing, with sales, and printing. Newsprints account for about 60 to 65% of the cost of producing a newspaper or a magazine. So if you take that out of the equation and you're putting out everything online, you cut costs massively and you try and balance it with the lack of revenue or a fraction of the revenue that you get online compared to with print.
Because the expenses are down, so you could still be possibly as profitable in that context.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Soumya, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I really, really appreciate having you on, and I know you're busy, but I'm so glad that you were able to make it on, and so thank you so much. Just hang on for a second as we close out. So thank you for being a guest.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for having me. Loved
Okay,
it.
thank
Really
you.
enjoyed it.
Okay.